The state of Israel had to fight for its survival right from the very beginning. And then the Israeli military had to rely on hand-me-downs from the World War II era. They used everything from Cromwells and Shermans to outdated Renaults. And it took the new country several decades to make a full switch to modern British and American designs. Centurion MBTs were a workhorse of the Israeli Defense Forces for many years. One time they even gave quite a beating to Arab T-55s and T-62s. But Israel couldn't rely on Centurions forever. Originally, the plan was to replace them with another excellent vehicle of British origin, the Chieftain. The IDF tested the tank and were getting ready to produce it under license. But ultimately, Britain decided not to sell the tank to Israel. As Israel's military establishment was basically back to square one, they restarted plans to produce an Israeli-made tank that they'd be able to produce and employ regardless of any current political or military situation. In charge of this project was Israel Tal, one of the creators of the Israeli armored doctrine. The new tank was designed specifically with the features of Israel's terrain in mind. The Merkava also has a distant layout with the engine in front, its turret assembly and the crew compartment located much closer to the rear than in most MBTs. The idea behind this design was to make the vehicle more stable and grant additional protection against a frontal attack, especially for the personnel. Moreover, it allowed the tank to have more space in the rear in general, allowing increased storage capacity, which, among other things, meant it could also be used to transport troops if need be. Then there's also the curious case of Merkava's suspension. The team behind the project opted for a coil spring suspension. Like on Soviet BT tanks, the legendary T-34, or British vehicles like the Crusader. This kind of suspension provided excellent stability and mobility in the rough terrain of Israel's rocky regions. When it came to picking the gun for the new tank, though, the military was pretty conservative. They went for the license-built variant of the 105mm M68 tank gun, a true classic. The first prototypes were ready in 1974, and in 1979, less than 10 years after the start of the development, the new tank was adopted by the IDF. It was given the name of Merkava, with stress on the last syllable, meaning chariot in Hebrew. The first time the tank saw action was in 1982. The Israeli MBT proved to be an effective weapon against both infantry and armor, including the then bleeding-edge T-72. It's worth noting that increased storage capacity in the rear definitely came in handy, as the Merkavas were sometimes used to move troops as well. Despite the success of the initial model, it was pretty clear that the work on Merkava is far from over. In 1983, the IDF adopted the Merkava Mark II. In War Thunder, we have an updated variant of this vehicle, the Mark II-B, featuring thermal optics, a more powerful engine, and improved armor. All of that was given to the tank to boost its combat capabilities in urban environments. Nowadays, the original Merkava models can only be found in museums. Finally, in 1989, the IDF received an even better MBT, which is by far the most numerous tank in frontline IDF service. We're talking, of course, about the Merkava Mark III. The most prominent addition was the incorporation of a 120mm smoothbore tank gun designed and produced by Israeli military industries. Furthermore, this new Merkava was fitted with NBC protection systems and a new 1,200 horsepower engine, which was very welcome, as this variant of the tank had a weight of 65 tons. Just think about it. That's on par with the German Tiger II or the last Soviet heavies. In War Thunder, we have the Merkava Mark Iii variant with modular composite armor. Merkava tanks are still in service with the IDF, and new units and modifications are still being delivered to the military. So the Chariot has been defending its country for several decades already. Are there any people out there in the comments section that saw a Merkava with their own eyes? Do you have a favorite Merkava in War Thunder? Come on, get your fingers typing and tell us in the comments below. See you later.